Welcome everyone to this webinar, and it's great to see you again, Darren. Thanks, man. This is the first non-deal group webinar we are hosting for Aptorum Group, and I'm Jared Sim. I'm in charge of the marketing at Spark Plus, and I'll be the moderator for today. So the format for this webinar will be a 30-minute presentation by Darren and a 15 to 20-minute Q&A from the attendees afterwards. So if you guys have any questions, you can actually submit through the Zoom application. Just a brief background of Aptorum. So Aptorum Group Limited is listed on the NASDAQ with ticker APM, and it's a biopharmaceutical company dedicated to developing and commercializing novel therapeutics to tackle unmet medical needs. And Aptorum Group is pursuing therapeutic products in neurology, infectious diseases, gastroenterology, oncology, and other disease areas. So without further ado, Darren, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this webinar for Aptorum Group as well. My name is Darren Lui. I'm the President and Executive Director of the company. And in the next 30 minutes, I'll walk you through, for those who haven't been with us before, I'll walk you through a little bit about our pipeline and what our upcoming catalysts are. So if I may, I'm going to share the screens now.
Yep.
So just to give everyone a quick company overview, myself and together with our CEO, Mr. Huen, we co-founded the company about 4 years ago in 2016. And before that, actually, the company was established as a family office investment fund since 2010. Actually, my background has been, I used to work for a major UK-based investment bank called Barclays Capital for most of my career. Before that, I graduated in biochemistry, first class honors with Imperial College of London. So my current role at the moment is actually in charge of business strategy, business development, obviously, as well as a lot of investor relations perspective as well. Together myself and Mr. Mr. Huen himself was actually a graduate from Princeton University. After that, he actually joined Janus Mutual Funds as a healthcare analyst before he went back to set up a family office based in Hong Kong. And as I said, I started investing for many years in the US biotech and healthcare space. So about 4 years ago, the family office fund were transformed into what is now Aptorum Group, with really our key focus on what we call unmet medical needs. So these are basically diseases which are either they don't have treatment, or even if they do have treatment, it's not a very effective treatment as well. We believe that unmet medical needs is where the key growth areas, and within that, we have a number of disease focus, including what we call orphan diseases. Some people refer to that as rare disease. Our infectious disease, which is one of our primary focus as well. We also focus on metabolic diseases as well as women's health. And a combination of these disease areas have culminated over 15 therapeutic candidates right now under development in our portfolio. Our business strategy is to focus on what we call early stage research to proof of concept. So usually this is focused on discovery stage and bringing these candidates all the way into at least the proof of concept stage for phase 2. And after which we actually have a number of options to decide. For example, either we can continue developing ourselves into the what we call the pivotal trials, phase 3 trials, or very often actually, we end up with a partnership with some of the major pharmaceutical companies, either through a licensing or some sort of co-development opportunity as well. Our key market and regulatory focus is first of all, is the US FDA, where a lot of our team's expertise is from. But obviously China NMPA and the European EMA follows very closely behind that, which allows us to target basically the 3 major continents for our drug itself. The company actually listed on the NASDAQ, we're traded under the ticker APM since December 2018, so just under 2 years from now. We have 2 major development sites right now. One of them is based in Hong Kong Science Park, where we have a number of collaborations with local universities, including the University of Hong Kong and the Chinese University of Hong Kong, as well as Polytechnic University as well. And also serves as a base for us to liaise and continue to look at collaboration models across the academic institutions in that whole region, including Singapore as well. We have a lab there, which is what we call the non-GLP lab, in Hong Kong, which is focused on early stage chemistry, earlier stage development work, including formulation work, where a lot of the intellectual property comes from. And then we also have a secondary site, which is based over in Toronto in Canada, which is focused on the processes which are closer to clinical trials. So this is what we call GLP, GMP manufacturing, and also, as most of our trials actually will be done in North America, also the clinical trial coordination work will be done out of our Toronto, Canada site. At the moment, we have just over 40 full-time staff and another 45 or so scientists, advisors, and consultants that we work with on a daily basis. And as I said, just a brief slide, a summary of some of our key management team here. As I already introduced myself and Ian, we also do have a third executive director, Dr. Clark Chen. Dr. Clark Chen was actually a trained doctor from UCL in London, after which he actually went over to NHS in Singapore to complete further his specialist training, and then subsequently joined Raffles Medical Hospital both as an operations director and subsequently as a deputy general manager of Raffles Medical Hong Kong business. So he actually brings with it a wealth of experience within the physician and hospital network as well. We're also joined by Ms. Sabrina Kang, who's our CFO. Sabrina actually joined us from another major US listed company. It's called China Cord Blood, where Sabrina helped us and also actually also supported China Cord Blood's listing work back on the US stock exchange as well. Dr. Thomas Lee, so he's actually our head of research and development. Thomas actually joined us from previously he was at Chinese University of Hong Kong as an academic professor. And then before that, he actually spent most of his career, over a decade, at Celgene and Novartis over in the US New Jersey site. Throughout his career, he worked on more than 25 assets, and of which over 10 assets, have gone into market, 3 of which actually have reached over $1 billion in sales. So Thomas actually brings with him a wealth of experience from his Novartis and Celgene days, and currently heads up our research and development, especially the formulation, the chemistry, the CMC work in relation to that as well. We're also joined by Dr. Angel Ng, who's our COO, who's actually previously worked as a project manager at the University of Hong Kong and actually also at the Hong Kong Science Park as well. Just a little overview of some of our key advisors and principal investigators that we work with. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but just for your information. So we do work with a number of very senior medical dean level advisors across the world, in particular Hong Kong, in Chinese University of Hong Kong, as well as the University of Chicago, where Dr. Nishan Agrawal is based. We were recently joined by Dr. Kira Shinneman. Dr. Kira Shinneman actually recently joined us as a strategic consultant. She's based over in the US. She's currently served as a managing director at the Healthcare Investment Bank, H.C. Wainwright. Before that, she attained her PhD in biomedical sciences from Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York. And currently, she's also a co-founder and CEO of a company based in New Jersey called Diamir, so D-I-M-I-R Biosciences, which is focused on neurodegenerative-based diagnostics as well. So I'm going to take this opportunity to walk you through our portfolio as well. For those who has joined us the first time, we're going to go through it to give you up to speed as to what we have in our portfolio. And for those who actually been following us for a long time, I'll be giving you a little update on where progress of things are in the next up to currently now, and also what we're looking to do in the next 6 months. So our platform actually focuses, as I said, on a number of disease areas. Our first area of focus is what we call orphan diseases, rare diseases. So this is what we call the SACT platform, and we'll talk a little bit about our drug discovery process in the next couple of slides. The SACT series actually currently we have 4 assets under active development and investigation. First of all, our most leading asset is our asset called SACT1, which is focused on a disease indication. It's called neuroblastoma. So neuroblastoma is a form of solid tumor. It's one of the most predominant solid tumor for children below 10 years old. For this particular asset, we are just in the midst of completing our final stages of validation work. And also in parallel, we're also preparing our what we call the IND submission package for this particular, it's a repurposed drug. And actually this asset, we expect to be able to commence what we then call the phase 2 trials, starting in aiming for around Q4 2020 this year, subject to the FDA's IND clearance. We also have 3 other assets right now, SACT2 and 3, which are still under validation, which we'll be hoping to announce in due course what these indications are. And also we have a asset that we announced. We started screening against COVID-19, given the prevailing situation, using a similar approach under our Smart Act platform in locating potential repurposed drugs that can actually work on the COVID-19 disease as well. We have our second platform, which is what we call the Acticule series. Acticule series is focused on deadly infections, in particular, covering both bacteria and virus. And obviously a very hot topic these days. We have had this particular platform is actually in collaboration with the University of Hong Kong's microbiology team, which is very well known for those who are from that region. It's actually very well known for discovering the 2003 SARS virus. And obviously at the moment, the University of Hong Kong microbiology team is actually very closely involved in the investigation of the COVID-19 and also act as advisors to the regional governments for that reason and for the COVID-19 situation. In collaboration with University of Hong Kong, we have acquired the 4 most advanced assets, which is ALS 1, 2, 3, and 4. In addition to that, we also have a joint drug discovery research collaboration with the University of Hong Kong, where we're constantly screening new targets coming out from that platform, where we have joint ownership of the patent itself. Our most leading assets under this platform right now is ALS4, which again, we'll talk a little bit about the background to this asset. This particular ALS4 asset at the moment is in the final stages of what we call IND enabling studies. We expect to be submitting the IND application in the second half of this year to allow us to commence what we call the phase 1 trials in North America for this asset. Now, these assets, ALS 1, 2, 3, 4, are what we call a first-in-class asset. They're not repurposed drugs. They're actually new drugs, new chemical entities targeting quite deadly infectious disease. So we're very excited to present you a little bit about that later on of our various assets as well. We also have another asset here, ALS1, which is also another new chemical entity. It's a small molecule that is targeting influenza A, treatment of viral infections caused by influenza A, which is currently undergoing lead optimization stage right now. We expected to be able to complete the lead optimization before the end of the year, increasing the potency of the asset as well as overcoming the general resistance issues encountered by some of the existing drugs targeting influenza A, such as Tamiflu. There's another drug that's Soflusa, which was developed in Japan. It's also accounting around these resistance issues. So our asset ALS1 actually has a more upstream target relative to those 2 drugs. And also we're getting quite a lot of attention on this particular drug given the current virus situation. And I believe a couple of days ago, there was a news also came out from China that they've discovered another flu type virus, what's quite common amongst pigs, for example, which is actually a very interesting focus in Asia for this particular type of strain of virus, influenza A. So this asset is also very exciting for us, and we'll talk a little bit about that in later slides. We also have ALS2 and 3, which is targeting what we call Staphylococcus aureus. It actually targets a much more broad spectrum gram-positive bacteria group for bacterial infections. And these 2 assets are currently undergoing lead optimization stage right now. We expect to be able to complete the lead optimization by around end of Q1 next year in 2021. Our third platform is in what we call a Claves series. It's actually a series that's focused on metabolic diseases. In particular, we target using what we call a microbiome-driven mechanism in targeting these metabolic diseases. Our first indication there right now is targeting obesity. And actually, this particular asset, obviously, it's a huge market. And this particular asset uses a new first-in-class technology. It's a macromolecule-based technology to target how we actually modulate in our digestive system, chemicals that is actually a primary cause of obesity as well. This particular asset is undergoing lead optimization stage right now. We hope to be able to complete the lead optimization towards the year end, after which we'll be actively taking this asset forward into the next IND enabling stages. This particular platform has the technology is actually very scalable. We have over potential 70 druggable targets under this platform. And at the moment, we are also actively investigating 2 further indications at the moment, which are also major classes of metabolic diseases as well. And just to cover off our remaining portfolio of assets, which are some of them are in a slightly earlier stage as well. So our very first asset is the focus on women's health. So our NLS1 asset is focused on a treatment of what we call endometriosis. This is a first-in-class drug, a non-hormonal drug that focused on endometriosis. Now, for those who don't know what endometriosis is actually these very painful lesions that grows inside the woman's uterus. And actually endometriosis is what we call a highly unmet medical need as well, and actually very prevailing in women. On average, 1 in 10 women in reproductive bearing age have some form of endometriosis, and usually the diagnosis period could take up to 7 years before you discover them, and also in very extreme cases causes a lot of bleeding as well as infertility in women as well. It's currently endometriosis. It doesn't actually have a very effective treatment market. As there are 2 major treatments right now. One is in surgery, and the other one is actually through contraceptives, which obviously directly affect the fertility of the patient itself. So this is what we call a very highly unmet medical need, and we do have a first-in-class drug that has now completed lead optimization stage right now. That is actually a non-hormonal, non-contraceptive based approach towards this particular disease as well, which also we are getting a very interesting feedback and also reverse inquiries from other counterparties on this particular asset as well. We have other earlier stage assets right now focused on also liver cancer, which is still in the discovery stage, as well as our neurodegenerative platform, which are still at a very young stage in terms of focusing on various things around diagnosis and also the treatment of Alzheimer's disease as well. The other asset I'd like to bring to your attention is our supplement asset, which is called NLS2 on the TIV as well under our trademark. And this particular supplement, we're in the process of commercializing it in 2020 in Hong Kong, UK, and Europe first. This particular is actually a supplement, it's a health supplement focused on targeting women's menopausal period. So as women undergoes their menopause, they see a sharp drop in estrogen production, and as a result of that, actually that gives them a lot of issues and a lot of side effects, as well as osteoporosis as well. Obviously, most of us would be aware that it's a major issue affecting half the population in this world. The supplement approach is actually an approach in conjunction with the traditional Chinese medicine team in University of Hong Kong, where we've licensed a naturally occurring a bioactive ingredient inside some what we call the Chinese yam. So Chinese yam actually has this bioactive ingredient that through years of research have been demonstrated to show that it has the ability to upregulate estrogen production as well as alleviate osteoporosis in our animal models. So as a result of that, we have a enrichment technology with a patented enrichment technology where we are now able to prepare that as a supplement product to be able to target the women's health market, especially in the menopause age group for women. Obviously a huge, immense market size. And due to the registration requirements, we are now actually targeting to launch this in the second half of this year in a combination of Hong Kong, UK, and Europe. And that will be followed by the North American market in around 2021 as well. And also we have an earlier stage investment in a robotic catheter technology, which are currently undergoing, starting to about to commence animal trials as well, focusing on using an MRI-guided cardiac catheterization and actually focusing on cardio and related diseases as well. So just to maybe kick off with a little bit of our Smart Act platform, our first platform, the SACT platform. As I said, we're actually focusing on orphan diseases under this platform right now. And just to give you a little bit of background, so there are currently over 7,000 orphan diseases identified by the US FDA. And actually, the of this 7,000 diseases, actually 90% of these orphan diseases are currently untreated or does not have effective treatment. So for us, we believe that this is actually a huge growth area. And also some of the drugs that we develop, even though it's actually for orphan diseases, usually have other multiple indications attached to it as well. So it doesn't mean that it only has one narrow indication. Potentially some of these drugs have multiple indications, including the particular orphan diseases that we're screening against. As we actually select diseases to screen, we apply a list of disease selection criteria, including, for example, how much do we know about the diseases? What is the disease pediatric dominant? We tend to have a favor of pediatric-based diseases because usually it attracts a more accelerated review process by the US FDA. Obviously, the clinical trial design is also very important, and most importantly, is the competitive landscape. Does this disease already have a very effective drug available, or does it actually have a certain sections of that patient which is currently still considered to be unmet? So these are the criteria that we select in order to prioritize our screening, and through that we'll derive a list of orphan diseases that we're currently prioritizing as part of our discovery platform. Our process here under the SmartAct platform is twofold. First of all, is what we call computational, or what we call in silico screening. In particular, through our chosen disease targets, we actually combine this with a computational-based screening involving over 2,600 or so approved small molecule drugs. So we have a library of these already approved and marketed small molecule drugs where we can actually use our computational interface to perform an in silico high throughput screening against these disease targets. That will allow us to narrow down to a small subset of small molecules which can show potential efficacy against this particular disease. And we select these into what we call the next stage of screening, which is the wet lab validation, involving a combination of in vitro and in vivo validation. And then most importantly is through the IP selection process, because we get this question a lot with repurposed drug, is how we actually protect the intellectual property. We actually usually only select candidates that we can patent. So the typical patents that we stringently apply here are things like the indication patent, for example, the disease patent itself, the reformulation patent. We usually change the way we administer the drug, and usually in some cases even the crystal form structure. We also consider filing things like combination patent to the extent if the drug can be used in combination with existing standard of care therapy, as well as other patents such as dosage patents as we approach the dose escalation studies in the clinical trials as well. So through this very stringent IP selection process and filtering, we eventually develop one candidate that we actively take forward into the US FDA's 505(b)(2) pathway, which is the drug repurposing pathway, to actually move into human clinical trials for that reason. So maybe just a little bit about our first indication. The first disease that we selected to screen against is a solid tumor called neuroblastoma. We like this. We selected this because neuroblastoma is still considered to be highly unmet. Actually, there are over 50% of the children right now that do not survive beyond the 5-year survival period, even with existing therapy available right now. It's actually one of the most common type of solid tumor in children, and the estimated treatment market size based on 2017 figures was already $2.6 billion a year, with a compounded annual growth rate of 3.7% in this market as well. It accounts for 15% of all cancer-related deaths in the pediatric population right now. And actually recently, as early as January this year, neuroblastoma has currently one monoclonal antibody treatment available. Again, the effectiveness is closer to somewhere like 40%. And this particular drug was actually acquired by BeiGene, based in China, for $160 million for its China rights earlier this year in January during the JP Morgan conference week as well. So it's actually a highly focused disease areas. In fact, orphan diseases right now is highly focused not just in the US, but also in China. So the Chinese NMP have now come up with their 140 strong list of orphan diseases that they would like pharmaceutical companies to focus on. As a result of that, we expect there will be a further acquisition activity available within the orphan disease space, especially from some of these major China-based pharmaceutical companies. The orphan disease also have other advantages. For example, when you actually have it approved in the US, the US provides at least 7 years market exclusivity, and that is in parallel to any patent protections that you may have on this particular drug. And actually in the European Union, they actually provide an even longer marketing exclusivity, which is up to 10 years of marketing exclusivity for orphan disease drug as well. Our SSCT1, as I said, is actually a repurposed drug. It's actually targeted against neuroblastoma. We have, it's actually a patentable asset, which is why we're selecting this asset forward to develop into the 505(b)(2) pathway. And throughout some of our in vitro analysis, we were able to demonstrate, a significant reduction in the way it treats neuroblastoma cells. You can see visibly on the slide, there's a visibly confirmed reduction in neuroblastoma cell lines. And also we have quite an abundant data right now in our animal models that we actually demonstrate the efficacy of SACT1. Now, what is very interesting here, what we also found out is that SACT1 is actually is synergistic together with existing standard of care or standard chemotherapy. So very often when children suffer from neuroblastoma, their first line of defense is chemotherapy. So there are more than 5 of these chemotherapy available right now for neuroblastoma patients. And what is important here is that a lot of children do not survive beyond the chemotherapy. As you can appreciate, chemotherapy is a very toxic drug. And actually young children in particular, children below 5 years old often don't survive beyond this period. So what we were able to demonstrate here is that this particular drug, SACT, was able to demonstrate a synergistic effect, is able to exacerbate the effect of the standard chemotherapy, which is very important because first of all, there are 2 particular targets here. So one is that actually this potential drug together with standard chemotherapy could potentially target unresponsive patients, so patients who are no longer responsive to existing standard of care, and potentially we can actually enable their responsiveness to standard of care treatment. And second target here is to be able to potentially reduce the dose of standard chemotherapy for pediatric patients and be able to achieve potentially the same efficacy results for these children as well. So it has a very interesting mechanism that actually has the effect of exacerbating standard chemotherapy. Now, as a result of that, we believe that SACT1 could be potentially as a first-in-line therapy in conjunction together with standard chemotherapy process. As I said, this is a repurposed drug, so the drug has been in the market for well over 10 years now. It has a very well-established safety and tolerability record. Previously there were adverse event studies showed 0% deaths, even at very high dose rate of 150 milligrams. There's also a very well-established pharmacokinetics profile established and previously approved by the FDA, showing a relatively long half-life of somewhere between 43 to 55 hours for this particular drug as well. So all of this data will be recycled into our 505(b)(2) submission as well under the US FDA. And now I'd like to jump onto our infectious disease platform. As I said, it is a very exciting disease area that we're focused on right now, in particular our ALS4, which is our leading program in the targeting what we call Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA. Some people refer to this bug, bacterial infection, as the superbug. Now, ALS4, actually 1234 itself, are what we call the next generation anti-infectives. It is actually, most of the companies, even academic institutions, have now moved on away from antibiotics-based research. As you know, antibiotics is creating a lot of antimicrobial resistant issues around the world. The WHO, the US FDA, and the European Regulatory Agency are constantly battling with this antimicrobial resistance issue and coming up with policies to focus and counter these resistance issues as well. So ALS4, together with the rest of the family, is what we call the next generation anti-infective. Is what we call it actually adopts what we call an antivirulent approach, a non-bactericidal drug for this particular superbug MRSA itself. We'll talk a little bit about how it actually counters that as a mechanism. We've developed this as a first-in-class drug with an oral form treatment. So it's actually one of the very few drugs against MRSA that could be used as an oral form. You'll see later on, there's a slides covering a little bit about that. And actually it reduces, our target here is to provide a potent treatment as well as reduce a significant risk of developing what we call Staphylococcus aureus resistance issues. This particular asset, we're targeting IND submission, as I said, in the second half of this year, with phase 1 trials to be commenced in North America. ALS1, again, is another novel approach, again, a next generation approach towards influenza A. It has a more upstream target than Tamiflu and shown to be extremely effective in our in vitro studies right now and in vivo studies, which we are also undergoing lead optimization stage right now. It has a distinct mechanism compared to Tamiflu and Xofluza. As a result of that, the market size is actually very significant for the influenza A as well. And as I said, ALS2 and 3 is still under lead optimization stage right now, which is targeting the broader gram-positive bacteria group, again, uses a novel antiviral approach towards gram-positive bacteria itself. Talking a little bit about ALS4 and the MRSA market. Now, the MRSA actually is a very deadly bacterial infection. If you go on the WHO website, you'll see that it's classified as a high priority development target, together with a derivative of this bacteria, which is called VRSA, vancomycin resistant Staph aureus group as well. The mortality right now for a blood infection, bacteremia for MRSA, is close to 30%, with a very high percentage of relapse coming out. So actually a patient that will suffered from this disease again and again and again, coming out from this particular infection as well. Based on 2016 estimate figures, the MRSA market right now is close to $3 billion with a compounded annual growth rate of over 3% per annum as well. There were two major deals that were done in the last couple of years. One of them is a 2014 deal done by Merck in the acquisition of Cubist Pharmaceutical. Cubist Pharmaceutical manufactures the second in line antibiotics, which is called daptomycin. It was acquired for $8.4 billion. And in 2018, just 2 years ago, Roivant also completed the in-licensing of Intron, which is a Korean-based company, phase 2 asset for around $667 million of upfront and milestone payments as well. So it's actually, we believe, is a huge growth market for this for MRSA. Just a little bit of landscape. We get this question a lot on, what are the shortfalls of existing antibiotics treatment available for MRSA infections. So you see, we've highlighted the top 6 treatment for MRSA. In particular, vancomycin is a product that has been in the market for well over 60 years. It's still the most prevailing form of treatment, antibiotic treatment for MRSA itself. There are two things to note here on this slide. So one is actually the resistance issue. So if you look on the right-hand side, actually almost all these drugs have now encountered some form of resistant drug resistance issues. Vancomycin, for example, has been discovered, and a new strain has been discovered, which is called vancomycin resistant Staph aureus, has been discovered since 2002. Again, it's a major issue right now that the WHO is trying to grapple with. Daptomycin, again, the asset that was previously acquired by Merck, has demonstrated resistance issues since 2006. Linsolid as well, developed by Pfizer, has resistance issues, and some of these other drugs actually encountered even super infection issues as a result of their resistant mechanism. And most of these drugs, actually, the administrative method is IV, because most of these are large molecules, so they actually have to be through injection IV, with the exception of vancomycin and linsolid. So vancomycin does one form of oral-based treatment, which only targeted local infections in the gastrointestinal tract. It's not available for wider MRSA infections, as well as linsolid, which has an oral form, but unfortunately, linsolid is not able to target, which is the most common form of blood infection or bacteremia as well. It also has its own limitations. And actually, ALS4 itself could be used as a standalone and as a combination therapy together with some of these existing antibiotics. We believe that ALS4 actually overcome a lot of the shortcomings from vancomycin. As I mentioned to you, vancomycin with standard treatment right now has a very high mortality rate of 30% and above of MRSA patients itself. It actually potentially complements the other bactericidal antibiotics. So therefore, ALS4 is not a direct competitor of these antibiotics, and able to demonstrate in a synergistic effect together with some of these existing antibiotics against MRSA itself. This particular approach for ALS4 has an award back in 2017 in Geneva, where our principal investigator, Richard Carr, actually attained for the first time a ICPIC award in a novelty concept of tackling MRSA infection across its ALS4 and as well as ALS2/3 scientific approaches as well. Just a little bit about the mechanism. So, for example, antibiotic right now, actually, the mechanism of antibiotic is actually go for typically what we call broad spectrum indiscriminate attack across the bacterial group as well. So, antibiotic for Staph aureus, as I said, vancomycin is one of the most prescribed antibiotics in MRSA, and this actually gives a lot of other side effects. For example, it has this effect in terms of destroying your microbiome composition inside your gut itself, and which often very many cases leads to what we call superinfection risks, and also due to drug resistance issues. ALS4 is what we call a non-bactericidal. In fact, actually, what it targets the toxicity and the potency of the bacteria itself. By disarming the toxicity, it allows the bacteria to be disarmed and be cleansed by our own host immune system, our own host, neutrophils and white blood cells. Now, this is a very novel approach. It's an approach that has been actively encouraged by both the US FDA guidelines as well as the US FDA as well as the WHO guidelines as well, using what we call an antiviral approach. So targeting, rather than targeting the bacteria and killing it, actually target the pathogenicity, the toxicity of the bacteria itself. The mechanism of action, maybe very briefly just to walk you through it. Typically, our neutrophils, our white blood cells, would release something called what we call reactive oxygen species. And these ROS is the ones that actually neutralize and attack and eliminate bacteria infection inside our body as well. However, Staphylococcus aureus or MRSA has this golden pigment around it, which is called Staphyloxanthin. Now, Staphyloxanthin has the effect of neutralizing these ROS attacks. So as a result of that impact, it actually rendered these neutrophils, our white blood cells attack, to be extremely ineffective against MRSA infection. As a result of that, MRSA is able to proliferate and actually in many cases able to even engulf some of these white blood cells and be able to multiply through the white blood cells mechanism as well. Our drug ALS4 actually targets the removal of Staphyloxanthin. So actually what it does, it actually inhibits one of the enzymes that produces Staphyloxanthin, the golden pigment. And as a result of the removal of the Staphyloxanthin, the reactive oxygen species attack, the ROS attack by white blood cells, become significantly more effective. And as a result of that, promotes the cell death of the bacterial infection itself. And you can demonstrate here with our increased dose of our drug itself, you'll see it started to decolorize this particular MRSA bacteria group as a result of the removal of Staphyloxanthin from the bacteria itself. And in some of our early stage in vivo model for a blood infection, which is the most prevailing form of MRSA infection, in our lethal model, so this is when rats are injected with a very high dose, a lethal dose of MRSA infection. You see the black line here that actually all the mice died within 4 days of that infection. And actually through the administration of ALS4, more than half of the mice models were still able to survive with a statistically significant results through the ALS4 in protecting them against what is a very lethal dose of MRSA infection. So this is extremely positive results for the assay itself. And on top of that, we also have what we call a non-lethal model. So this is to mimic more like current situations of patients right now, is actually to introduce the treatment only after 14 days after the infection itself. And here we were able to demonstrate that ALS4 shows a 99.5% reduction in bacterial count in our animal models, despite after a 14-day infection as well. So it's a very effective and positive results in our in vivo model for bacteremia. And then just jumping on to our other assay here, which is ALS1. Our ALS1 assay targets influenza A. In fact, actually targets what we call a nucleoprotein inside the influenza A. It has a more upstream process relative to the other two drugs, which is Tamiflu as well as Soflusa. As a result, that this is a first-in-class technology and first-in-class approach targeting influenza A as well. Now, influenza A right now is a very high-focused virus infection, both in China as well as around the world. It affects a majority of the population during every season of flu season, and as a result, that we're also getting quite a lot of attention on this particular drug, and we actually hope to continue to complete our lead optimization stage right now until before the end of the year to be able to swiftly move this asset into the next stage of development itself. I also want to quickly cover off our metabolic disease platform, which is our Claves technology as well. So actually, the Claves technology uses a very interesting mechanism using the microbiome, so your gut, as an approach towards these metabolic diseases. As I said earlier, we have over 70 potential therapeutic targets available right now using this highly scalable large molecule technology that we've developed. The molecule actually binds to these chemicals with high affinity and specificity. It also is non-absorbable. As a result of that, we are free from a lot of the systemic toxicity issues, and we have multiple candidates under development right now with various indications. In particular, our most leading indication right now is targeting obesity. It's under our lead program called CLS1. We are targeting metabolites that are secreted by your gut microbiome that is directly linked to how obesity is modulated. And as a result of that, in our in vivo model, we were able to demonstrate a significant weight loss in our initial in vivo model without affecting the gut's mucosa. There's no inflammation being observed, and actually the function of the liver and the kidney remain to be extremely normal as a result of that. So we have some very encouraging in vivo models of this supporting this platform. As I said, this is a platform that is constantly to generate new sustainable therapeutic pipeline. We have over 70 targets currently in our pipeline right now, and most of these are what we call systemic diseases such as obesity, diabetes, fatty liver, cardiovascular disease, obviously a major issue in Asia, as well as some of the more digestive related diseases such as IBD, colorectal cancer, and so forth. So this is a very scalable platform, and actually will continue to be able to deliver new drug targets for us using this technology. A very high level overview of this technology. As I said, it's a macromolecule technology. So what happens is actually inside your gut, your bacterial groups, which is called a microbiome inside your gut, they secrete a lot of chemicals, and thousands of chemicals exist in your body. It's really until recent years, people are starting to realize what these chemicals, what their roles are of these chemicals are. And actually a lot of it it plays a very important role in regulating your metabolism and metabolic functions inside your body as well. In some cases, some of these metabolites were able to demonstrate it also regulates your neurodegenerative related diseases, as well as other diseases such as cardiovascular diseases as well. So by targeting these metabolites and regulating how we absorb these metabolites inside our stomach, we actually designed the macromolecule technology, which is a CLS drug candidate, which actually specifically binds to these metabolites. You intake that as an oral form, it binds to these metabolites, and as a result of that, the whole complex is too big to be absorbed through your systemic circulation. And what it does, it basically passes out through your digestive system, through your stool, for example. And as a result of that, you can remove these metabolites, this targeted metabolite from your gut as well. And what we were able to demonstrate is that in our animal model, through this particular mechanism, there's a significant weight loss being demonstrated in our mice model within the 2-week period, over 10% weight loss in our animal model. But most importantly, the animal remains to be healthy. So this is the most important part. The weight loss was not due to any sort of toxicity issues. The weight loss is actually due to the loss of one of these metabolites, which basically reduces the way the animal absorbs glucose inside our cells as well, itself as well. So we also believe that this technology may have be able to treat things like diabetes as well, which we're currently under further investigation under our CRS1. So we've got some very interesting in vivo model right now for this particular asset. And just finally, coming on to our the last asset that I wanted to raise to your attention, which is our supplement asset, as I said. So this is the asset NLS2, which we're currently in the process of commercializing in Hong Kong, UK, and Europe in the second half of this year. It actually has the effect of addressing estrogen depletion inside your body. It has the effect of upregulating one of the enzymes involved in the production of estrogen, and also has the effect of dealing with osteoporosis as well by actually improving bone mineral density, bone volume fraction, trabecular thickness in our in vivo models as well. It doesn't cause any toxicity. As I said, this is a bioactive ingredient that was previously naturally occurring in one of the plants that we constantly eat. So what we call Chinese yam has been an edible plant for many, many years in China and actually outside of China as well. And this actually, this EOI doesn't actually give us any toxicity issues. And we have a enrichment and identification patented technology itself that allow us to create this as a supplement product for targeting women's menopause health as well. And then just on the final slides, I would like to talk a little bit about our financials right now. And this is based off our 20F filings for 31st December 2019. At the moment, we have, as of end of the 20th December 31st, 2019 right now, we have working capital. We had working capital of $5.3 million. We actually did a further capital raise in February. We raised another $10 million right now, which allows actually further working capital in excess right now, together with any credit facilities we have, well in excess of $50 million right now. And that will allow us to continue to sustain our operations for the next 15 to 18 months for the company as we actually approach the various stages of clinical trials itself. Okay, Well, thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions from the audience.
Thank you, Darren, for this engaging presentation. We have some questions on the floor already. So if the attendees, if you guys have any more questions, you can just send it our way. Let's start from the top. There's a question for this. Is Mr. Ian Huen the same family that owns a majority stake in ICBC Bank? And is there any affiliation with Stanley Ho?
So that's a very interesting non-Aptorum related questions. Obviously, I cannot represent Mr. Huen. This is his personal business, and actually, I think you will see that actually in some of the disclosures we've made so far. Mr. Ian Huen was previously involved as a financial advisor to the acquisition of a Macau-based bank for ICBC Bank itself. And actually, obviously, that bank, as we all know, it's in public information. The bank that was acquired by ICBC was a majority bank owned by Mr. Stanley Ho, who's recently, as you know, has passed away. And now actually what has now basically become the ICBC Bank of Macau. But I would say that actually the family actually currently doesn't actually have active participation in the ICBC Macau Bank. As you may well aware, it is actually run by ICBC Group itself. So actually, as far as Mr. Ian Huen's participation, he was a financial advisor to the acquisition process. I think this was back in almost close to quite early stage in about 2007 right now, so almost over 10 years ago.
All right, and the other question is, given that Aptorum is based in Hong Kong and due to the recent political issues arising between Hong Kong and China, how does that affect you guys as a NASDAQ listed company?
Yeah, so actually, I think there's a couple of areas. Obviously, we're keeping a very close focus on what's happening between, Hong Kong, China, and also the US as well. And actually, for most of our development work, we're actually done in multiple locations as well. As you can appreciate, and you saw in our slide, we have a Toronto site where we develop most of our more advanced assets based on our Toronto GMP facility over there as well. So obviously, Toronto and Canada, they're actually very remotely affected by anything that's happening in Hong Kong and China itself. We also diversify some of our work into places like Taiwan as well. So Taiwan, where we have a very strong CRO and development team based in Taiwan, developing some of our assets as well. So not extremely affected by any of these geopolitical reasons as well. I think biotech still tends to continue to run on their own in various parts of the world. The other area which we get a question a lot is obviously the US-China relationship around how they look at NASDAQ listed companies. And we're actually glad to report to you that actually because our auditor, which is Markham LLP, actually Markham is one of the audit firms that is actually based in US rather than China itself. And actually all our audit papers and so forth are actually retained in China, in US, sorry, beg your pardon, in US, where the US partners signed off over in Markham as well. So for that reason, actually we are not affected at all by some of the recent announcements by the SEC and the PCAOB. If SEC were to want to review the audit papers, they're fully available in the US through the Markham. And actually Markham is one of the very clean audit firms. It's one of the top 10 audit firms in the US that is not included as part of the PCAOB's review as they were reviewing some of these Chinese listed companies. So for that reason, we are actually completely unaffected by that. And most importantly, I think as political reasons going on in Hong Kong and China, as our work is actually done mostly outside of Hong Kong and China itself. As I said, our clinical trials are actually done in US as well. I myself is based here in the UK in London, and most of our investor base right now, as we've diversified our investor base, are very much US-based investor group as well. So for that reason, for many reasons, we're actually not really affected by the geopolitical reasons. If anything, we actually got some benefit out of it from that. For example, our Hong Kong Science Park facilities, our laboratory over there, due to local government incentives right now, actually has been rent-free for a good 6 to 9 months. And we believe, a lot of these incentive programs, which continue to stimulate biotech research, is able to benefit us there for what is our specific laboratory there in Hong Kong as well. So for that reason, we which continue to focus on our programs. We continue to diversify our development sites outside of Hong Kong and China, and also actually constantly also keeping a close eye on what's developing between the SEC and China itself.
All right. And the other question is, what type of grants are you able to utilize as an early stage biotech company?
Okay, so there are grants in a number of locations, both in the US and also in some of our research that we do with universities in Hong Kong itself. So, for example, a lot of our early stage research, people have commented you have a lot on your portfolio. How do you actually sustain the development of these? Well, actually, a lot of the early stage research, when you're actually in collaboration with a university, actually benefits from a lot of grants. For example, the Hong Kong government produced these industry collaboration grants that actually funds close to 60 to 70% of the development cost of the particular drug program, provided that you are in collaboration with the university itself. So for that reason, actually, a lot of these early stage research, where is actually done and carried out by the university, obviously with our expertise support, but actually our financial resource utilized is actually very limited because of these very generous grant schemes from the local government. In the US, the US have a abundant grant schemes available for many different disease areas, including orphan diseases, rare disease, oncology, infectious disease is a key hot area focused by the US FDA right now. And as a result of that, the NIH have all kinds of incentives right now promoting people to do more infectious disease research. We have a team that is specifically located over in North Carolina. It's actually a team that is focused on grant application for us for our programs. We're in the process of applying a lot of these grants right now. And some of these grants will be used to support our clinical trials coming up for our SACT1 program, as well as our ALS4 program and infectious disease programs, and also actually able to support us as we expand our collaboration models with other US-based academic institutions as well.
Right. And there's another question is, have you already been able to exit any of your early stage developments?
Not at this moment. So at this moment, we're obviously still in the early stage of research. So we do. I could say that we are constantly being in discussions with a number of external pharmaceutical companies about various programs that we have in our pipeline. In fact, actually, recently I was attending the Bio conference just 2 weeks ago now, where there was actually a lot of interest in our infectious disease assets in particular for good reasons, because obviously due to the COVID-19 situation, a lot of the major pharmaceutical companies right now are now moving into the infectious disease space, both from a virus and bacteria standpoints. As a result of that, our assets fall very squarely within those parameters. I would say something we are constantly in discussion with, and we have connections with a lot of the business development team of some of these major pharmaceutical companies around the region as well. So we constantly, as we obviously we have a update of any deal being specified, we'll make the appropriate announcements to the shareholders. The other area we're seeing a lot of activity in the last 6 months is in the women's health area as well. A lot of the it seems to be a renewed interest of especially European-based pharmaceutical companies right now in anything to do with women's health as well. So we're seeing quite a few areas right now that suddenly have again just popped up on these major pharmaceutical companies' interest, and who are constantly scouting for technologies to acquire.
Okay, and following that, from a global healthcare perspective, which area that you are focused on do you feel is the most pressing in terms of the unmet needs?
Yeah. So obviously, I think the hot topic right now is the infectious disease space. As you can appreciate, I think with the whole COVID-19 situation, a lot of renewed investments have now dive into the infectious disease space. It's not just about COVID-19, but really the widest spectrum of what is the potential source of the next pandemic. As you can appreciate, a couple of days ago, the BBC announced, found out that there's a form of influenza virus now they've identified in pigs in China, which could potentially be highly transmissive. It could potentially be as bad as the COVID-19 pandemic right now. It's a very interesting asset. It's actually a virus that is derived from H1N1, which is something we're also actively now investigating because we have an asset, which is ALS1, which is also targeting influenza A. So I think there's a renewed interest there. We're seeing a lot of, again, major pharmaceutical companies now focusing on viral related assets and investments. So I believe in this current environment, the highly unmet, both from a patient perspective as well as investor standpoint, is actually in the infectious disease space that has now come up with a very strong and sudden renewed interest in viruses. Now, virus and bacteria tend to go hand in hand. So typically when you have, for example, COVID-19 research, COVID-19 infections, usually it comes with bacterial infection as well. So COVID-19 actually affects your lungs, and actually with that actually complicates, for example, a lot of patients have been identified to also show MRSA infections, MRSA pneumonia infection that's also affecting the lungs as well. So typically virus and bacteria goes hand in hand. I would say the other technologies that we are also looking at is highly unmet is also in the women's health market. For example, one of our technology, NLS1, which is focused on women's endometriosis, is a highly unmet disease. Endometriosis itself, as I said, it's very painful lesions inside the uterus. 1 in 10 women have it. And the current existing treatment right now is either surgery, which is obviously it's not complete, because after surgery, a lot of women have relapse issues. And the other treatment is actually through contraceptives, which obviously have the effect of basically causing the woman to be infertile. So this particular area of women's health is also very highly unmet, and we have a very interesting technology, and there's one there which are basically able to address and plug this market with something that is non-hormonal, non-contraceptive based technology targeting this very prevailing unmet endometriosis diseases.
Okay, and part 2 of this question is, out of your pipeline, which technology do you think is the most potentially scalable for various diseases?
So at the moment, in terms of broader spectrum disease, I will keep an eye on SACT1 as well, because SACT1 right now, we are obviously we're only not just targeting for neuroblastoma, but actually we are constantly now screening against almost more than 300 different cancers against SACT1 right now. We hope to be able to report back with some more data over the course of summer. We believe that SACT1 potentially could be scalable for other major types of cancer diseases as well. And obviously, to the extent if we can identify these cancer targets for SACT1, it can greatly improve the valuation of the asset, the marketability of the asset, and also the number of indications that we can potentially run as part of our phase 2 trials for SACT1. So I would generally say, keep an eye on SACT1. We hope to be able to make some announcements over the course of summer as to what other potential cancer types that the drug could actually work on.
Okay, and there's a question about the location. So do you think Hong Kong is the ideal location to base your company?
Actually, I would say that our locations right now is quite well diversified. So obviously, as for legacy reasons, some of our founders, Ian is based over in Hong Kong. I'll say myself, I'm here based in the UK. And actually half our board is actually based in Europe as well. So I would say that actually Hong Kong is not just our only location that we based our business on. I would say that obviously we do have a development site around there, and we do have collaborations over in Hong Kong. And actually a lot of our initial shareholder base are based in Hong Kong and from that part of the region as well. Now, Hong Kong itself, together with our development site in Toronto and here in London in Europe, allow us to fully diversify our business. But I would say we're not going to give up on our locations in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is a gateway to to one of the major markets here, which is China. So also in collaboration with that, a lot of the clinical trials are done on a multi-center basis. So the 2 major university hospitals in Hong Kong, the University of Hong Kong's hospital, and also Queen Mary Hospital, that is, and also the Prince of Wales Hospital over in Hong Kong, are the common what we call a clinical trial site for some of these phase 2 and phase 3 multi-trials done by other multinational companies. And these are the sites where a lot of the patient data could be emitted for the China NMPA process. So for that reason, we'll continue to maintain a base in Hong Kong, as well as also diversifying our work across other parts of Europe, as well as other parts of US as well, of course.
Okay, I think that's all for questions. So perhaps wait another like 30 seconds. If anyone has still has more questions, you can type it in the chat. I think
I'm happy to answer. There's a question there I see for shares. How much shares do I own in APM? So yeah, actually, if you look at our 20F, I hope I own a lot more than 15,000 shares. So actually, if you look at our 20F filings, and I believe on some of the public disclosures of holdings, actually myself, together with my related persons, we own close to 17% of the companies, and that's excluding Mr. Ian Huen, who's the major founder of the company. He himself owns well in excess of 60% of the company itself. So if anything, I think also through the February round, he also participated in further capital injection into the company. So actually, you'll see in his institutional holdings, his shareholding has also further increased as well. So yeah, I would hope, yeah, I definitely own a lot more than just 15,000 shares.
Okay, great. I think there's just one question that came in. So do you have any plans to expand to Australia?
Yeah, Australia is a very interesting country. It's a jurisdiction where it's obviously it's a major market, and actually Australia have also done relatively well in the last 6 months in terms of the COVID-19 situation relative to others as well. Australia is one of our key market of focus. They have some very strong local university over there, Monash University and Melbourne University, and also got some very interesting technology coming out from those platforms, which we constantly also keep a dialogue on as well. I would say for our existing drugs, other than US, China, and Europe, Australia is also one of the key market for some of our drugs eventually to market into. Although I would say at the moment we don't have a physical presence over there in Australia itself, we do have a lot of the collaborations together with some of the universities there. We're constantly looking at the technology and actually looking at some of the listed companies over there in Australia to establish any potential collaboration models that we have as well.
I think that's all for the questions today. So thank you, Darren, once again for the great presentations. And I hope that, that everyone learned a lot from this, and investors who are keen to know more about Aptorum, please reach out to us at Spark Plus. And if you guys end up buying more shares on Aptorum, that would be great. Do let us know as well. So thank you everyone for tuning in today, and I hope to see you guys in person after the lockdown.
Sure.
Thanks,
Thank you very
guys.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.